Welcome, Robert, to this interview series showcasing HKIAC's leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. It's a real honor to have you with us. So what I want to do is give an overview of your career. You completed your legal education in England in 1969, and in 1970, you joined the Hong Kong Bar. You served at the Hong Kong Bar in total for 34 years. 16 years after joining the Hong Kong Bar, you were appointed Queen's Counsel. And then in 1997, at the time of the handover, you were appointed Senior Counsel in Hong Kong. Before that, in 1988 to 1989, you served as the chairman of the Hong Kong Bar Association. Then in 2004, you were appointed as a judge of the Court of First Instance in Hong Kong. And then the following year, you were appointed as a justice of the Court of Appeal. The following year, you became the vice president of the Court of Appeal. And 4 years later, you were elevated to non-permanent judge of the Court of Final Appeal, which is Hong Kong's highest court. 2 years later, in 2012, you were appointed as a permanent judge of the Court of Final Appeal, and there you served in that role until 2018. And 2018 was also the year when you were awarded Hong Kong's highest honor, which is the Grand Bohemia Medal. You were one of 4 recipients in that year. And then after 2018, you retired as a permanent judge of the Court of Final Appeal, and you now currently serve as a non-permanent judge of the Court of Final Appeal in Hong Kong, and you sit as arbitrator. So in terms of HKIAC, you were appointed to HKIAC's council in 2018, and you also serve on the Finance and Administration Committee, but your connection with HKIAC goes a long way back than that. In fact, you are one of the founding fathers of HKIAC, and your signature appears on the original Articles of Association back in 1985. And you served as a director of HKIAC from 1985 through to 2011, so 26 years. So you're very familiar with the institution.
Yes.
It's very good to have you back with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk to you about your career and about your view of the evolution of law in Hong Kong and HKIAC. And my first question, I guess, is with respect to your practice at the bar and then your transition onto the bench. You were a member of the bar pre-1997 and post-1997. Of course, 1997 was a very important moment for Hong Kong. How have you seen the evolution of the law in Hong Kong before and after that period?
Well, Hong Kong was a very different place in 1970 from the international financial center, which it has since become. In 1970, our judges were drawn from the colonial legal service. But in pace with Hong Kong emerging as an international center, I think the business community and the Hong Kong government realized that the legal system must grow with Hong Kong. So starting from the latter half of 1970, Hong Kong began to recruit judges from the bar in England, as well as from the Hong Kong bar. One of the notable persons who came to Hong Kong in the second half of the 1970s was Mr. Justice Hunter, who was one of the strongest supporters of the establishment of HKIAC. And at about the same time, we had John Griffiths QC, and after him, Michael Thomas QC, who were appointed as Attorney Generals in Hong Kong. And I must mention him as well as Neil Kaplan. He, I think, came to Hong Kong in either 1979 or 1980. To work in the legal department. And of course, he was one of the prime movers behind the establishment of the HKIAC. So you could say that the Hong Kong legal system grew with Hong Kong And my career, I suppose, grew with the development of Hong Kong as well. And so as I became more senior in Hong Kong, before I took Silk in 1986, in those days, it was very common for leading English QCs to be asked to come to Hong Kong to conduct cases. And they were a great boon for Hong Kong because of the examples that they set and the competition that they provide. And I think the Hong Kong bar has become much stronger as a result. The Law Society too grow, I think, apace. Now there are, I understand, about 2,800 solicitors. And in preparation for today, I looked up the latest statistics. And I was very surprised to learn that of the 30 legal firms in Hong Kong by size, only 6 are domestic firms. The other 24 are international firms. I think some describe themselves as Magic Circle, White Shoes, etc., etc. But anyway, Hong Kong's legal system, as I've said, has grown with Hong Kong as an international financial center. And it is very important for Hong Kong to maintain its place as an international center, that there should be international lawyers in Hong Kong. And I think in keeping with that, starting from, I think, the early 1980s, maybe 83, 84, the idea of the establishment of an international arbitration center, I think, began to germinate. And the steering committee was appointed. And I think we have to thank the foresight of the business community in Hong Kong, as well as the Hong Kong government, that they appreciate that for Hong Kong to truly develop as an international center, we need an international arbitration center. And I think the international character of the arbitration center has remained the same from the beginning up to date. Anyone who is interested could just look up our website and they can see the people who were involved, and some of them continue to be involved with the Hong Kong IAC, and they could see the important international setup of the Hong Kong International Arbitration Center. Now, 1997, for a long time, was a very important date. But when it became a bit of an anticlimax because nothing changed. And the transition, I think one could say, with no fear of contradiction, was seamless. So I practiced before 1997, and I continued to practice after 1997 until, as you said, 2004. And I don't think there was any change at all. And judges, of course, became more and more, they were more and more recruited from the local bar. And I think there were still some judges coming from London as well. And of course, English, I think not just English. Since 1997, not only practitioners from London, but also from Australia and other common law countries were permitted to come to Hong Kong as advocates to practice in cases which requires their specialist skill. And so far as arbitration is concerned, of course, there's no restriction at all. Anyone can come. Well, it doesn't have to be a lawyer. But I think in most international arbitration center of any size, they are, I think, almost invariably, the parties will be represented by lawyers.
That's true. It's really interesting to hear your perspectives about the transition of Hong Kong over the years, and also, some of the with respect to 1997 that although it was a major transition, actually not a lot changed in terms of your experience. I want to talk a little bit about the transitions in your life, in your career. So, you know, the first major one, I guess, was moving from the bar to the bench.
Yes.
But then from the moment you were appointed to the Court of First Instance, your rising through the courts was relatively swift. So how was it for you, first of all, moving from the bar to the bench, but then making your way through the Court of First Instance, the Court of Appeal, and then all the way to the Court of Final Appeal as one of the permanent judges, where really the responsibility, it's a great one. Can you tell us a little bit about those transitions for you?
I was very lucky. Basically, I think I was over every vacancy which felt vacant. And that's why it seemed quite a swift sort of progress. But the preparation was a long one. I began to sit in the High Court in 1986 as a deputy judge, and then as a recorder of the High Court. So for about 18 years, every year, I was committed to sit for 4 weeks. So I've had a long training as a trial judge before I was appointed permanently to the bench. And I think it was very useful experience. I believe experience as a trial judge is very important, because I think it is important to observe how cases unfold. Of course, one would have seen it as an advocate, but it's not the same. One is partisan, but as a judge, you see the cases of both sides unfolding. And I think that's a very valuable experience. But because of the long period of preparation, as it were, becoming a judge was very smooth. I could almost say uneventful, and it was a very good change, because life became much less hectic. As a busy practitioner, I used to work almost always 7 days a week, but as a judge, that was not necessary, and it was also much less stressful. So I was very happy sitting on the bench, both at first instance in the Court of Appeal, and I particularly enjoy my time in the Court of Final Appeal because in every case in which I was involved, there would have been one overseas non-permanent judge sitting with us. And it was very good to have the opportunity to work with them and to observe them in action. So, and of course, cases became more interesting. And changing from the bench to becoming an arbitrator, that is a change, but it's also a challenging change. On the one hand, as an arbitrator, one is less constrained by technicalities. But on the other hand, I think one has to change one's mindset a bit, especially in the case of international arbitration, because one is concerned with people from different cultures and different legal systems. So I think one has to be more open to ideas. Common sense becomes even more important. And I think general knowledge and experience of life is also important. And when it comes to deciding arbitrations, one has also got to keep in mind that unlike being a judge, say in Hong Kong, one's judgment very often is directed towards the Court of Appeal, the Court of Final Appeal, and common law lawyers. But as an arbitrator, that is very different. The parties, as I've said, are likely to have come from different cultures, different legal systems. So one has to have them in mind too, They have to read it, they have to understand it, and whether they lose or they win, you would like them to think that they have had a fair hearing. And if they have lost because they have done something which they should not have done, they want to know, and then so that they can learn from it. And also, because of its international nature, awards may be enforced internationally. In systems, in territories whose laws are very different from ours, for what might be said, what may be left unarticulated in Hong Kong, we'll probably have to spell out in our awards. And that is why sometimes one looks at an arbitral award and say, well, this is a bit long. But then it is important that it's addressed to an international audience as well. What may appear to be long in Hong Kong may be just adequate elsewhere. So I think one has to change one's mindset a bit and leaves one's comfort zone. I think that's very important. Arbitration is interesting, and it is important, as my long involvement with the Hong Kong AAC shows, I think, the realization, not just my own, but the realization of the people in Hong Kong, the community in Hong Kong, of the importance of arbitration. And it is understandable why a lot of business people opt for arbitration, because arbitration has its advantages. And I think to thrive as an international center, we have to, I think, provide what is needed internationally.
Yeah. Is there anything, when you started, you were one of the founders of HKIAC, and you mentioned that even back at its establishment, HKIAC was serving an international market, and it was set up in an international way. Apart from that, now that you've returned into HKIAC, has there been any other evolution that you see that is noticeable to you compared to the early days?
Well, it's certainly become much more professional, much better run. And I think that's partly because of the effort which people have put into it. But it's also because of the growth of HKIAC. And I think with the growth of caseload, we probably are better able to afford the facilities that we have and the staff that we have, because it's not cheap running the HKIAC. And my understanding is that apart from some setup costs, we are basically self-funded. And I think the HKIAC also grew with Hong Kong, and also grew with the number of amount of work that we have in Hong Kong.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for your time. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to speak to you. And I personally, and I know all of the staff and all of the other council members are very glad to continue to work with you as one of us.
That's very kind.
Thank you.
Thank you.